Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's continuation of the What's Next series covers the Miami Heat, and their 2018-19 season certainly didn't turn out great. They finished 2 games out of the 8th seed in the East after earning the 6th seed the year before, and struggled to find any kind of sustainable positive momentum throughout the season. They had a ton of injury struggles, and that combined with a general lack of talent prevented them from making much noise at all. And to make it all that much worse, as I'll talk about in a second, they really don't have that much young talent, and they actually had the highest payroll of any team across the entire league. There are certainly going to be some big changes for this team over the next couple of years as they attempt to recover from the departure of LeBron James in free agency in 2014 and the loss of Chris Bosh to a medical issue, and then now the retirement of Dwayne Wade. So let's go ahead and take a look at what is next for this team. First up, let's talk about some building blocks. The biggest one has to be Josh Richardson, who played in 73 games, led them in minutes and scoring, and overall just took a significant leap forward in his 4th season in the league, from someone that was seen as strictly a complimentary option before this year, but now could realistically become an all-star one day. His name was even brought up in trade talks for Jimmy Butler, and that offer was certainly better than the ones that the Timberwolves actually ended up agreeing to with the Sixers later on. But after Richardson got off to such a hot start, the Heat had to pull his name out of the trade talks. Now, to be fair, he did slow down pretty significantly later in the season, but nonetheless, his defense, offensive versatility, youth, and contract situation make him an outstanding asset for this team, either via a trade or on the court. Next up is Justice Winslow, who recovered from a down year last year to once again show the promise that made him such a highly sought-after prospect in the 2015 draft. His jump in play largely came with an increase in ball handling and playmaking responsibilities as Goran Dragic missed so much time with injury, where Winslow essentially played as the de facto point guard on the floor at times. This allowed him to focus on the things that he excels at, getting to the rim, making smart passes, and playing with energy and effort on the defensive end. But as a nice added bonus, his increased role seemed to provide him with a ton of confidence in other areas as well, as he had his best 3-point shooting season as a pro in terms of a combination of volume and accuracy. He certainly still has areas to improve, namely becoming a more efficient playmaker with less turnovers and becoming a better free throw shooter, but it's a huge plus for this team to have a guy like him on the roster that can do so many positive things on the court and on a freshly signed, team-friendly rookie extension as well. Moving on now to the only player for the Heat to play in all 82 games this season, Bam Adebayo. Although he only started 28 games to Hassan Whiteside's 58, the starting center label didn't really matter for the Heat this season, as they both had the exact same minutes per game average. Just as he was projected to coming out of the draft 2 years ago, Adebayo made positive contributions with his athleticism, energy, and effort. He still has a ways to go in both the rim protection and overall skill parts of his game, though his assist average is promising as it relates to the second part of that, and he is under contract for the next 2 years to continue to prove what kind of value he has to this team moving forward. And really, that's about it when it comes to the young guys for this team. Dion Waiters is 27, but hasn't played in 50 games in any of his 3 seasons with the Heat so far. Kelly Olynyk is solid, but I don't see him becoming anything more than that in the future. And I guess you could talk yourself into putting 21-year-old Derrick Jones Jr. in this section, but his recovery from a serious knee injury puts that in doubt as well. So really the burden of being the building blocks of this team falls on those 3 guys: Richardson, Winslow, and Adebayo. Fortunately for the Heat and their fans, they do have the ability to add another young player to that list this offseason with the 13th pick in this draft, and they do have a history of finding solid players to build around in that range, evidenced by the 3 players that I just mentioned. Richardson was a second-round pick back in the 2015 draft, while Winslow was picked 10th the same year, and Adebayo was selected 14th overall in 2017. So if any team has a track record of turning lower lottery picks or second-round picks into valuable players, it's the Heat. You guys have already heard me talk about a ton of guys that could be available in this range if you've watched any of my other What's Next videos, so you already know where I'm going with this. I could see any of either Romeo Langford or Bol Bol or PJ Washington or Tyler Hero being picked up by Miami and developing into an important piece for them. Okay, now let's move on to free agency and take a look at the absolute nightmare of a payroll sheet that the Miami Heat have. As of right now, the Heat are on pace for over $129 million in team payroll for next season, which is the fourth highest figure in the league and well over the salary cap, and it's pretty easy to see why they're in that situation. Assuming Hassan Whiteside and Goran Dragic opt into their player options for next season, they'll have 10 players under contract for next year at the start of free agency, and 8 of them will be making over $10 million a year. The most expensive of that group by far is Whiteside, who will be on a $27 million expiring contract next season, and although he is still a solid rim-protecting big, that is way too much money to be paying him, which a lot of people anticipated would be the case when he signed that contract a few years ago. Now, to be absolutely clear, the Heat have a mess of a payroll to deal with for next season. I mean, anytime you're paying Ryan Anderson, James Johnson, and Dion Waiters over $40 million combined in a single season, you're doing something wrong. But having said that, there are some bright spots. As currently constructed, they'll be shedding a ton of money next summer with a contract of Whiteside, Anderson, and Dragic totaling over $60 million, all coming off the books. Now, there have been some rumblings about Dragic and even Whiteside declining their options and becoming free agents this summer, which would change things completely, but in my opinion, it's extremely unlikely that that actually happens, so I'm going to assume that those contracts run out in 2020. With a projected cap of $116 million in that summer, the Heat could go into 2020 with $46 million in cap space if they don't take on any long-term money before then, which would be an incredible turnaround considering their current cap situation. That summer, they would still have Johnson, Olynyk, Waiters, Richardson, Winslow, and Adebayo on the roster, so with a few savvy free agency moves, they could create a solid team around that group. I wouldn't anticipate them being max contract players in free agency that summer at the moment, given their general lack of star talent, but it is the Heat, so you never really know. And so it seems like the best option at this point is to play out next season, prioritizing the development of their 3 best young players, plus whoever they draft with the 13th pick, and then go into the summer of 2020 armed with the kind of cap space that they could completely remake their team with, and that should really be their big move summer. Because Richardson holds a player option in 2020 that will likely decline, and Adebayo needs a rookie extension by then as well. And as you can tell by how often I'm talking about them in this video, the contracts and potential development of those 3 guys are really what drives the future of this team. Even as bad as things look at the top of their payroll for next season, they'll only be paying around $26 to $28 million a year to those 3 players combined for the next 2 seasons until Richardson and Adebayo need new deals while they hold a team option for Winslow's contract in 2021. As a result of these smart signings and draft picks, they do actually have a future despite their inflated payroll for somewhat aging players, which makes this a strangely pivotal season for this team. When I started doing research for this video, I assumed that the Heat would have to throw away a season or 2 and make some salary dump moves to create any kind of flexibility in the future, but the reality is that they're actually set up pretty nicely once they get past next season. They'll probably end up in right about the same spot fighting for a 6 to 8 seed in the East, but after that they'll have some options. And weirdly, their situation reminds me a bit of my very own Brooklyn Nets at the start of this season. Things might seem a bit bleak with only a few pieces to really build around, but one surprising season at the right time can change everything, just as it did for the Nets and just as it could for the Heat. If their 3 young guys continue to show progress, Richardson becomes a borderline all-star level player, Winslow shows growth as a playmaker and shooter, and Adebayo adds more offensive skill to his high-energy game, they could start to have something intriguing brewing in Miami. I mean, if you look at it just right, next summer they'll have some complimentary veterans under contract, like James Johnson as a solid wing defender when healthy, Olynyk as a floor spacer, Waiters as a 6-man when healthy, plus the trio of young guys, and that combination could start to look intriguing for max or near max stars in 2020 free agency, and they'll have over $45 million in cap space to back up their argument. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but if everything falls just right, they can at least put themselves into the conversation, and given their payroll difficulties over the last few seasons, that's about all that they can ask for. And keep in mind that this is the Miami Heat that we're talking about. Free agency moves and smart drafting is what they've been all about for a decade now, and they've almost pulled off surprising moves in the past like this, like coming this close to signing Gordon Hayward in 2017. So even though in the end things might not seem that promising for them, all it takes is one intriguing season, a couple of nice young pieces, and a ton of cap space to turn this team into a force to be reckoned with in the East once again. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.